Dallas Signals present a Bon Mott's Halloween series celebrating 6 decades of horror
To perform an autopsy first.
with in-depth analysis,
That's much too vulgar display of power.
adult content,
I've been hurt once, okay?
adult language,
You gotta come work for me.
and spoilers.
Mrs. French's cat is missing.
Join us.
All you can do is pass it along to someone else.
And as a finale to MOTS-O-Ween, this Saturday we will be doing a live review Halloween, the movie at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our YouTube channel. So please come and join us.
Hello everyone, and welcome to part 1 of our special Halloween episode. This is focusing on the 1960s horror classic, Kill Baby. Kill! So I'm here, joined by Ian Manzer.
Hello?
Scott Thurlow.
Kill, baby, kill.
And myself, Steve Ramosi, obviously. So we're going to start off with a synopsis by Mr. Ian.
Before I give the synopsis, I have to say that this title of this is Kill, comma, Baby, ... Kill, exclamation point. So however you wish to pronounce that, go ahead. But the synopsis of the movie, it is a gothic horror that is just the 60s horror movie. It's the most generic version of that possible.
Indeed. All right. So we're going to start off with the introduction, wherein a woman who is possessed by something, you don't know what yet, jumps off of a staircase onto a spiked guardrail, or a spiked rail. And then you just look at her dead body as the credits roll for about 5 minutes.
For an exorbitant amount of time.
So, Ian, what'd you think of the intro?
I actually quite liked it. Yes, it's pretty jarring now to see the credit roll for that length, but it was something back then that happened often. I remember you see the car driving down the road while the credits just roll there. So I perfectly accept that. I wasn't bothered by the fact that we're just watching her. It wasn't. You don't even see a full. It's a close up on her torso with the wrought iron spikes just jutting out of it as the credits roll by. And it's an Italian production, so they're all Italian names.
I would like to point out that throughout that entire credit sequence, there was no more blood the entire time. It wasn't seeping into her clothes or anything. It was just there. She stopped bleeding immediately as soon as she was impaled.
Well, yeah, that happens.
They couldn't afford any more blood.
They were hot spikes. They cauterized the wounds right away.
Sure.
I thought it was an effective opening. It turned out to be not gorier, but more visceral than we expected it to. Mm-hmm. I think, Scott, you mentioned that you didn't expect them to actually show the...
I thought they were going to cut away before she hit the spike, so yeah, sure.
But, so I was interested from that.
Yeah, I think that it was a decent opening scene. I could have done with, 3 minutes less of the credits rolling while you just look at some spikes in some fabric, basically. But the part where she jumps off the staircase kind of immediately gets you into the film and, makes you want to figure out what the hell's going on. I don't know if you guys thought that the intro went past that part.
No,
but
it was definitely
that's what I looked at
as
the intro.
for sure. And I mostly agree. Again, it's sort of default taking advantage of a situation that's going to be interesting, almost always. So, and it's a classic horror setup. So yeah, it was all fine. And I was even. It only got jarring halfway into the credits. For a while, I was it's still fine. Yeah. Then we were okay.
Yeah, we started making bad puns on their names and everything like that.
It's one of those jokes, except for they try to play it as a horror thing. But it's one of those jokes that after a while it's not funny anymore, and then it starts to be funny again. Yeah. But this was supposed to be horrifying, and then after a while it wasn't horrifying again, and then it started to be funny.
Right. That's a good progression. That is what happened. Yes.
Also, to the point about the introduction, nowadays it's kind of debatable when introduction stops, but generally I think that when you have a credit sequence,
it's pretty clear where
if there's a scene before that, that's the introduction, right. And then that's the cutoff there.
I agree with that.
So,
what do you guys think for the intro? Everybody giving it a 1?
I believe we are. Yeah, I'm giving it a 1.
All right. Sounds good. And that's going to take us to the body, which I'll give a short explanation for. The Coroner and the woman that he meets in this town mostly just run around aimlessly for this whole thing. But, it's a bunch of the townspeople warning them that something terrible is going to happen, and then something terrible happens, and then they just kind of run away from it or react, and then they come back to try and figure out what happened. And that happens 3 or 4 times, and then you kind of get to the climax.
To go on further, the coroner is there with a police inspector who are trying to solve this woman's murder and like a number of other murders that have happened.
A number of occurrences
Right.
that were murders.
But that's
Or people dying, at least.
It is kind of them. It has really much the feel of like Ichabod Crane and Sleepy Hollow or Dracula, Frankenstein. I believe it takes place in like a Carpathian town,
Something
some
like that.
generic. It's really strange because it's a bunch of Italian actors speaking with like American accents playing Germans. So
I think some of them had like English accents too, a little bit.
But yeah, the main man of science facing off against kind of the superstition in like, the classic Gothic horror setup.
Yeah, no, I agree. As far as the body itself, it was mostly fine. I think I'll probably save something to say a little bit later, like towards the end. But overall, yeah, it was a classic, like them trying to basically, like Siebel said, wandering around a castle in the surrounding village and being told dire warnings and bumping into people getting murdered or running away from the supernatural fear.
Right. I think a lot of it, they could have done like the same type of thing. I think they did it like 3 or 4 times throughout the movie where it's like, you get a warning. Something happens to the person that gave you the warning. Like, you go and try to like figure out what's going on. And I think a lot of that kind of dragged a little bit. Even though this movie was only an hour and a half long, I feel like they could have cut out 20 minutes.
It dragged towards the end. I'm going to say exactly that, yes.
I was actually quite interested in this movie and was like, oh, this is like I could see why people consider this a kind of classical horror piece for the first half of it.
Yeah.
And then it started to be like, oh, I've seen this. They had this. The police inspector goes off to the castle or
the surrounding
the villa,
village, the cursed village.
and he disappears. And it was kind of sad because he was a very interesting character.
Yeah.
And then they have like a shrouded body, but yeah, it's like your mystery of who's under that. It's obviously the police inspector. And then like the reveal was not a surprise, so they kind of spent their surprises early on, and then kind of dragged throughout.
Sure, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I think overall though they did a fine job, but I agree like it started to feel a little bit wearying at the end.
Yeah, they had this reveal in about a third to halfway through that there's a witch in the town who's trying to protect the town against the curse, and their interactions are fine. But again, they kept retreading that plot point.
Right.
So so show me something new here. So like I was bored.
I feel like they reestablished characters a bunch of times, and I was mentioning this before we started talking that kind of made me know everybody's name. If that's what they were going for, it worked well. But you don't need to say the person's name 15 times throughout the movie to know who he or she is.
I think that applies to a different question, but I do agree with it.
But yeah, anyway, so as far as the body goes, anybody else have anything to add?
I think I'm going to give it a 1, like a softer 1, but still overall it was mostly fine, even though it did drag a little bit at the end. But it did a good job elsewise.
I'm going to give it a 0, but a soft 0 because for the exact same reason. Right. If it had continued on the same pace throughout, I would have given it a 1, but since it started just to meander a bit, I have to give it a 0.
I'm gonna give it a soft 1. I really wasn't unsure until I actually said the word, to be honest. Anyway, moving on to the end of the film. So there was a ton of exposition. I don't know if you guys noticed this too.
I was going to say that. The end was basically all exposition dumps and explains the curse.
Yeah, it was just everybody explaining everything about the entire movie.
But I predicted what the curse was about 5 minutes into the movie.
So here's the thing. I don't think they really had to have all that exposition because if you were watching the movie, you kind of knew all of that stuff already.
But again, it's sign of the times, I would say.
Yeah,
somewhat.
they just kind of spelled everything out. And then, out of nowhere, the old woman gets strangled. The old mother gets strangled. No, it turns out she was cursing everybody or trying to kill everybody using her dead daughter. And then
the Countess of the...
Right. She gets strangled by the witch, and then the witch kills herself, and then that's it. The coroner and the daughter, Monica, walk out into the sunset, and that's it.
See, what I found fascinating about the conclusion was the person dies right at the beginning, and then it's a horror movie, and no one dies for like the second to like the middle of the movie. I mean, the inspector dies, and then all of a sudden,
the Burgermeister dies.
No, but I think that's part of the conclusion.
Okay.
like the minute the Monica, who's the Countess's secret daughter, who
long lost hidden daughter.
She's away at college and she's coming back to town. And,
turns out she's the daughter of a murderer. And
the minute they start wrapping up the plot, I feel that's the conclusion. So people start dying left and right. The innkeeper's daughter, who was like possessed or was haunted by the ghosts around this. The burgermeister dies. The witch dies. The countess dies. Like, people are like dropping off left and right, just miraculously at the end.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain this movie happens over the course of one night, right?
Yes.
It's bookended by the setting sun on the first scene
when he shows up and
when he gets there. But you can see the sun over. Like they have the same shot when they leave the castle right at the end of the movie. The last 2 seconds of the movie, there's the sun rise. And then at the beginning of the movie, there's the sunset. So there have been, 8 murders or something before they get there, and then half the town is kills themselves via ghost.
That actually did, I guess, because she was summoning them, she was as she was about to get caught, she get desperate and summoning.
Yeah, no, that's what I got out of it too. I was going to say about I'm going to probably give it a bad score because of that. It was dragged out, and then I was like, a minute, I'll wrap up, and it was paced very, very poorly. The conclusion, I thought itself.
I felt
even though it was an okay, yes, they wrapped everything up, but the way they did it was poor.
I thought the conclusion was paced really well, and I wish that the rest of the movie was paced.
It would have taken 10 minutes if it was all paced like that.
They dragged it on. They could have gotten to that stuff faster. So it was fine when they did it, and then it was very abrupt. They're walking in the sunset, and boom, the movie literally just stops.
Well, there was nothing else to happen after that.
I was actually perfectly cool with that ending, and also
but I felt it to be
there's
jarring.
they're wandering through the castle at the end, and again everything's spiraling out of control, and it has to have. They have a fantastic shot, and I wonder if this is one of the first movies to do this, where a character is basically through magic is stuck in one room, and every time he exits, he enters it again, and he's chasing after this person, and it turns out to be him. It catches up to himself. I thought that was a very interesting shot.
It was a cool scene. I agree with that.
That was really cool. I think that they could have
wasn't the conclusion,
piled as many scenes that were similar to that as they could have on top of each other, and left out all the exposition at the end at the climax, and they would have been great. It would have been perfect. This movie, the thing that I'm gonna give it the end of bad score for is just explaining everything that you don't need an explanation for.
And the witch's death. It's super high school Shakespeare.
Yeah.
The way she stabs herself, gives a little soliloquy and then falls over incredibly dramatically
onto the mother.
Yeah, so it's a combination of both of those things that will let me give a bad score.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have anything to say about the end? Anything else?
No, I think.
While I do agree with you, Ian, I wanted to mention I do agree with you that with the sunset was perfect. I know you didn't like it. You thought it was too quick, but I was like, good. This movie's done.
Yeah,
there's no need to draw out this shitty romance for another 2 minutes or whatever.
It was sort of like the curtains closing on the stage.
I get it, but it just felt too abrupt to me. It just again.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, end 0
1
0.
Moving on to themes. So I'm going to give one of my themes, and then I'll kick it off into a conversation. But I think the main theme of this was science is wrong, supernatural ghosts are correct.
It's something like that.
Now, you're missing the greater point.
Oh, I'm sorry. The intricacies of this.
It's not necessarily horror's about facing the unknown, and the gothic horror has a specific kind of a subgenre where a learned individual who's a man of science, he's usually a doctor or a scientist, is confronted by
the unknown,
the rural elements, that the kind of backwater, the place where, in a sense, magic could still exist, where monsters could still exist. In the city, we've confronted our monsters. We've shined the light of science and we've conquered. It's the same thing that back in the day, the wilderness used to be such a character of where elves and werewolves and monsters could exist. Now, that's where the rural kind of world, it's the place that's still not been touched by science. So and that's where the horror comes in. It's an element of you're supposed to identify as kind of an intellectual person with this coroner and being faced with the utter absurdity of something he can't handle with his knowledge.
Right, but I think that's kind of the point of these. I mean, I definitely boiled it down a lot when I said that, but I think the point of these is that, like, just because you are intelligent doesn't mean that this magic doesn't exist, or, you know, these supernatural things don't exist. And then you come face to face with them, and you, as a intelligent person, or a scientist, or a coroner, or whatever the hell you have, like, your protagonist happens to be, it's the whole movie, or the whole story is about getting him to the point where he realizes he can't depend on being intelligent anymore.
I actually think one of the best versions of this is, I'm a huge fan of The Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp, but I think this is basically the same movie with different supernatural villain to it. It was still a witch who summoned a supernatural being to take revenge on townspeople. They're paralleled very similarly. I'm not saying one ripped off the other. I'm just saying that it's in the genre. And again, they're not condescending to science. It's more of trying to take in that the elements of horror is what we don't know.
Right. Sure. You guys are actually both somewhat wrong. Here is the real theme. Children, of course, are always evil, no matter what. And also, we don't like corners around these parts. It was sort of like, yeah. And on the flip side of that is, you're all just poor, dirty, ignorant villagers. I think it's a clash of that. But, like, that's facetious, yeah. But I think, you know, somewhat you said, yes, horror is always about fear of the unknown, or the monster in the night, in the dark, and science trying to find, you know, explanation, or confronted with it, trying to explain it away, or at least solve its mystery.
So I think that's a theme, time-tested, well-worn type of theme. Ever since science started conquering the unknown things of the universe, there have been stories about that. Like, Frankenstein came out in, what, 1800s?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because that was when they were starting to, like, mess around with electricity and stuff like that. So, but I mean, since that time, basically, since the Industrial Revolution, stories have been interested in trying to see where the limits of science are. And I think that's a good theme, but I don't know if there's, like, a deeper theme than that, or if they just, like, kind of went with that theme on the surface.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a surface theme, though. I think it's a common and true of this genre. I don't think it's shallow because it chose to make that point.
Well, I think that if something makes that point, it needs to... I think if a piece decides to use that type of theme, you have to either dig deeper than what has been said before on it, or go in another direction with it that's unexpected, or whatever. Sure, which I'm not sure that this film
was
did.
An earlier film, is all I'm saying. But I like that theme in general, no matter what. So I'm going to give it a good score based on that. Like, it's always interesting, at least regardless how deeply or not they may have explored it or what angle. It's still an interesting theme. Because of Ian said the nature, it's contained within the genre itself, really.
And I have a distinct fear of trying to go to explain science in the rural South. So,
fair enough.
It hits home.
Yes.
All right. Anything else on themes? What do you guys give it?
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm going to give it a 1 as well.
I am going to give it a 0. All right. Moving on to antagonist.
Now, is the antagonist the old lady?
The grieving mother of a dead daughter and her poor daughter who was murdered in front of a town full of people are the antagonists of this movie. What does that say?
I think poverty
and ignorance, of course, are the real antagonists.
Because if they were drunken
village
churls,
idiots, they could have saved her. Yeah, agree.
She could have also just chosen not to take revenge on all these townspeople.
No, but she's ignorant.
You.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I would become the antagonist. I'm fine with that.
Well, as Ian and I just chorused together, like, yes, it's facetious, but I think that somewhat can be
I think if you're doing a traditional antagonist, it will have to be the Countess.
Right. But you guys know me. I always go beyond, like, behind the antagonist is, like, the humanity's psychology behind that. So, anyways.
But that's always the case.
Of course.
If that's not the case, then it's a bad, story.
Yeah, there's no 0 at that point. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, I agree with you, Scott, that, like, clearly there were circumstances built into this story that turned this Countess into, like, a raving psychopath.
Murder.
But, you know, the little girl, I saw her baby picture. She has the meticulous room with all the bald dolls. She had some problems. She was
crazy already.
Yeah. Perhaps.
Maybe the townspeople thought they were doing the town a favor by getting her out of the way early. I don't know. But didn't work out for him anyway.
Went horribly wrong.
I don't know. What did you guys think of?
All right.
The Countess.
I forget the name of the actress, Liz Taylor.
I think she looked like Liz Taylor.
No, like she did the crazy woman in the house. She was the one where she's like it reminded me quite a bit of. Doesn't matter, but anyway, the fact that she's like this insane woman in the house, it's done well, but not well enough for me. I don't feel like she had any. I didn't understand her motives. I didn't understand why she. Her main motive was that anyone who upsets her, she sends a murderous ghost out to kill. I get that she had the trauma that she lost her daughter and all that. I just didn't feel it was set up well enough for me to believe that she was this.
Why didn't she try to kill all the townspeople?
why did she pick one person every couple of years?
Yeah.
I think he was trying to, but
Not
I have
hard
something to say
enough.
about that.
Yeah, I know. I didn't buy the antagonist.
I get you're saying, like, I mostly agree with it, but what I got out of it was that she was resentful, of course, to them because they let her daughter die. So at first she was taking, like, in quotes in her mind, legitimate revenge, and then later on, like, oh, this person's inconveniencing me, so I'm gonna have them murdered. Just them, though.
But it feels like it's inconsistent.
Yeah, right. I
with
know.
how,
I'm saying,
like,
I agree with that.
I think you mentioned, why didn't she have the entire town killed by the ghost? Like, why did she
Yes.
piecemeal it out over time?
Take
Like
off. So, well, she had. I guess they kind of explained that she had the deal with the witch, and then the witch was trying to like save people from becoming ghosts, and that the only person that she was really trying to save was the Burgermeister,
Who was her husband?
They didn't even make a single burger this entire movie.
Anyways.
So anyway, yeah, no, she was really inconsistent, I think.
And also, if the daughter is so effective at murdering people through hypnosis, how did the mother survive long enough to make a deal with a witch that if the daughter was trying to kill her?
Right.
Like
She was at the end of it. It was a little, again, it was a little fuzzy.
The daughter was trying to kill everyone in the house. She sent the other daughter, Monica, away, and
Et cetera.
I don't know, like, I guess something was going on with the ghosts, too, of people.
They could have taken time to develop her character more than they did.
Yeah.
And I think it fell flat. It's generic at best.
I would agree.
Well, I'm still giving Poverty and Ignorance a 1.
I'm going to give it a 0.
I'm also going to give it a 0, although I was thinking about... no, never mind. Gonna give it a 0. Moving on to protagonist, who I guess was the coroner and Melissa, the other daughter.
The other daughter was
Or not
Monica.
Melissa, Monica. Yeah, Melissa was the dead daughter. I don't know. They were alright, I guess. I like the coroner more than Monica. She was just kind of the standard, like, woman in a 60s movie, you know, which is boring to me, usually.
I love the protagonist. He was the classic chiseled jaw, like, American guy who's, even though he's an Italian.
They gave him all the good lines. They gave her nothing.
Yeah, like, always has the bravado, and he was a classic 60s. I imagine him also playing, like, a scientist in, like, one of these sci-fi novels and taking off his glasses. My God! I was actually hoping he'd say that the entire time, but...
Well, can't all get what we want.
Yes, but it's something what you just said about the antagonist is that all that is true, but that makes him completely generic. He's generic hero guy in generic gothic 60s horror movie. So that's all he was. And
yeah, but he
had moments, flashes of characterization, but overall not that much.
He
I don't know. Go ahead.
In horror, the antagonist is more important than the protagonist.
Sure.
Protagonist.
But you still want the protagonist to be likable.
Yeah,
at
I
least.
thought he was likable enough, but he played that role very much like the theme. He played the role of the Ichabod Crane. He plays all these major gothic. He's a standard city boy coming into.
Sure, but
I think he did the role well.
I still think he fell flat to me. Is all I'm saying.
All right. Yeah, I think he was fine. I think he was acceptable. I think that Monica was not great. I mean, it was a standard, we need a female lead, but we don't want her to say anything or
Except
do anything and just yell the whole time and be completely flabbergasted with every situation. Which, I mean, she did do a T, so I can't... It was she did the script well, I guess. But I did like Paul as the coroner. I liked his interactions with the Inspector Kruger in the beginning. I thought that the two of them were kind of played off each other well.
To that point, I think he would have been done well by having Kruger around more.
I agree with that. That's I'm going to speak more about that shortly.
Like that would have fleshed out, because I understand that you want to get rid of his connection to the outside world because you want to isolate him in an alien situation. But if they had maybe 20 more minutes of on-screen time together, it would have worked much better.
If they were actually just together the entire time the Inspector was missing and then the Inspector was killed in front of him, it would have been probably more effective.
Yeah.
But, so, anybody else? Protag?
I'm giving it a 1.
0.
I'm going to give it a 1 as well. Alright, so we're moving on now to secondary characters, some of which were the Burgermeister, the Inspector, the daughter in the inn.
Innkeeper and family.
The innkeeper and family, the witch, all of whom have names.
Ruth is the witch, but
Ruth is the witch. Yeah.
I liked almost all of the side characters. I thought they fleshed out the village very well, like what their functions were and what their relations and what their when Paul talks to them, they're all like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Now I'm cursed." Like that was funny. But definitely also. Did you guys think the Burgermeister reminded you of like Telly Savalas or something, or like a Bond villain? He's
a
bald.
little bit, yeah.
He got a weird face. Like I don't know. But he was a good character as well, and I definitely agree with what you just said, that the inspector should have been in the film more before he got killed off. That would have fleshed out their dynamic better, at both him and Paul, and would have made it more impactful when he died.
I like that you said that these secondary characters fleshed out the world more. I think what they did a really good job of in this movie, and I'll talk about this more when we come to style, is having a sense of place for everywhere in the movie. I felt like anywhere I was, I knew the character. Like as soon as you knew the characters, you knew exactly where you were in the film geographically within this town. And I think that they did a really good job of doing that, like making each space its own thing. And the way that they did that, I think mostly is through the secondary characters who all had their own.
You knew where they lived in relation to each other.
Yeah, exactly. They were all their own people. Not that they were more than one dimensional because they all had their own thing, but they all had their own separate thing. None of them blended together. Yeah. You know, when you were in the inn, you knew. When you were at the with the Burgermeister in his little office, like you knew exactly where you were, and that a lot of that has to do with set design too. But I think the secondary characters in that were a main reason that was so good.
I would like to talk about Moribund the Burgermeister, Peter Gabriel, a little bit. I loved his character in this because he kind of played that role of the man sitting on the fence of the city in the wilderness.
He's basically the mayor of the town with the dark secret, and he wants to do right, but he also knows it's sort of an unbelievable thing that people will look at him askew for.
You see his interactions with the inspector and with the coroner early on, and I was wondering how this guy survived in this situation. Then you find out that he's a lover to the witch, and she was protecting him, and that totally made sense, and I love that little detail. I actually I felt that they had a little bit of chemistry. I believed that they were kind of.
I like their chemistry better than I liked Paul and Monica's chemistry, to be honest. I like the chemistry between Paul and Kruger more than I like the chemistry between Paul and Monica.
Yes, exactly.
And I like the witch quite a bit too, even though she had like an overly dramatic death.
Yeah.
Like I thought she did a fine job. So there's a lot of the peasantry was kind of charming. They had like kind of the innkeeper was like an old gruffled mining town guy. Like, what you doing?
Poor and
with the gun,
but helpful. All nonetheless.
They're you don't want to know about this place. Get out of here.
Corners ain't welcome here.
Ain't welcome here.
But I just have to, as a caveat, say that the innkeeper's daughter is awful.
Nadine? Yeah. She was fine, I thought.
I don't know, like... Maybe she was... But what they had her doing was awful.
I agree with that.
She's, like, terrified the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, she's the scream queen of this...
Yes, that's what I was going to say. She served her well, but all I'm saying is you knew what her character meant to the rest of the setting is all.
Right, the script for her was bad. Yeah. She did nothing but, like... second guess herself and like think she was going to die the entire
That's a character you need in such a film, and she did it. So
she could have been a little deeper, but whatever. I'm not going to give it a 0 for her. So anything else, guys? Secondary characters?
I think that's all of them, and I'm
going to give it a 1.
Yep, me too.
One's all around.
All right.
One for you, one for you.
You get a 1.
Moving on to dialogue. Ian's going to say that he liked it, or at least certain parts of it. I think it was mostly terrible. And there were a couple lines that made me laugh, but that doesn't mean they were good lines of dialogue. That means
there were 3 good lines that were okay. Even if they didn't make you laugh, they were like decent. But the rest of it was just like, oh, and we say this a lot. Maybe it's a sign of the times. Like I guess dialogue has certainly advanced in script writing since the 1960s. However, even contained within it, yes, it's serviceable. We said that, but beyond that, and some of it was definitely cringeworthy, and that's always going to be the make or break.
I didn't cringe at any of the dialogue.
I did,
and I've seen many other '60s like horror films that were like committed war crimes compared to what this.
Fine, yeah, sure, fair enough, but regardless.
And there were like 3 great lines, and one of them was the coroner comes in, and Monica comes up and like, I believe Satan's in this town. And he's like, no. Just poverty and ignorance.
Which is one and the same, of course, as we said earlier. But yeah, I mean, sure, that was a funny line, but other than that...
No, but there were a couple that made me, like, not only laugh, like, I wasn't laughing at how bad they were, like, I was actually genuinely like, that's a pretty good line.
Well, I'm gonna come in with this one. There's a part right in the beginning where he walks into the inn. There's they're like, oh, it's the coroner. He's like, coroners mind their business. They know what's good for him. And I would be like, he is minding his business. His business is being a coroner. Yes. If he minds his business, he's going to do exactly what you don't want him to do.
That's a brilliant line. I have to say,
that is not a brilliant line. It's a mistakenly brilliant line, perhaps.
It depends what their intention was and what you're thinking.
No one writes that. Like that's not like a brilliantly bad line. The person who knew what they were doing when they wrote.
I don't know if that's true, but regardless,
maybe
it's structured in such a way that you couldn't. accidentally make that happen.
I think you could. It's like we don't take kindly
Maybe,
to
maybe not,
corners
but it
around
doesn't
here.
make up for the rest of it, is all I'm saying, so I'm not going to give it a good score.
I will admit though that Monica's lines, it felt like someone wrote her lines, like wrote a sentence and then switched so like, in this town I live, or something like all these kind of weird ways she was talking throughout it.
And there are also moments where people were literally describing the action they're doing. Like, that is terrible. That is bad narrative.
Yeah, I feel like this movie could have definitely used a better editor on the script. You know, go to Hollywood, find a script doctor, and fix this bad boy up.
So anyways, it's getting a 0 from me at the end of the day.
I think it's a 0 from me.
I'm going to give it a very soft 1 because I
man.
was actually amused by it.
Fair enough.
All right, moving on to style. This is I don't know, tell me if you guys agree with this, a gothic Euro horror 60s style, basically. Really stylized, very overly dramatic. The soundtrack was actually really good.
I was going to bring that up, yeah.
And, you know, there's just smoke everywhere, rising from the ground, and castles, and, you know, that type of thing. I think they did a great job on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the easiest one to answer. The style was very excellent. I was going to say also the lighting and the shadow play, a lot of the shots and some of the angles of the shots were cool. And it goes back to what we were saying. The way they showed parts of the village give you a very good sense of where everything was and who was doing what and when.
Right.
So I like that. And also, like one of the best scenes that we said is when he's chasing himself through the repeating room. That was really cool. That was very well done.
I think the director really was aiming for cinematography.
It's dripping with atmosphere, especially
more than plot or dialogue.
Yeah, especially Gothic horror, and the score, like you said, the soundtrack is very well done.
You can see a lot of these elements in later horror movies too. Definitely.
There's actually a piece of soundtrack that really caught my attention. It's a very simple, I think it's really organ and I think one other instrument, but it has this kind of like beat feel to it, and like it's like 2 keys on the organ, but it was absolutely
perfect.
Fantastic.
It was walking music.
Yeah, it was perfect for that scene, and like I said, I want to get that music and just play it while I'm walking around in time with it.
Yes.
All right. Anything else for style, guys?
I think it's pretty clear that it deserves a 1.
Yeah, one's all around. All right. Now, do we recommend it? I'm gonna let you guys go first on this one, and then I'll say what I think.
I can't, in all good conscience, recommend it. Like, it's mediocre at best, and yes, maybe it's an artifact of the piece of the times, and you can point to it and say what came afterwards. But there are certainly, like Ian said, there are many worse '60s horror movies, but there are also a couple much better ones.
So far, I gave this a 7. If I recommend it, it gets an 8. And even though I gave it a 7, which surprised me, I can't... unless you're doing what we do. Like, this is kind of a historical piece.
It's skippable as entertainment.
But yeah, I don't think majority of people will go out and enjoy this.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, as Scott said, many other movies recommend instead.
Ian, you're right. It's kind of it's a movie to watch if you're interested in... If you're a film student and you're looking for ideas in cinematography, check this film out. They have a lot of really good shots. Props are good, especially for like a '60s film. I think it pulled off a lot of those shots really well. If you're looking for a good story, there's many better out there.
And since I was gonna say, since our scale is based on narrative, I can't, like I said, in all good faith.
Right, I'm gonna have to give it a 0 for that, just because we're basing ours on narrative. So that's it.
Kill Baby Kill has been killed.
We got the scores there, Ian?
Yep. We'll go from top to bottom here. I gave it a 7, as I mentioned just earlier. Scott gave it a 6, and Steve will give it a 5. So that makes an aggregate score of 6, which I think is
that's
very
perfectly
fair
fine. That's about what it deserves.
That's about right. So we got a 6.
Right again, gentlemen.
All right.
As always, our opinion is correct.
And that has been our first episode of the Halloween special Bon Mots. And for myself and Ian Manzer,
we'll be back next time with the 70s.
Scott Thurlow.
Disco horror when we return.
Have a good night, guys. Don't forget to kill Baby Kill.
And a fantastic Halloween.
This Saturday we will be doing a live review of Halloween, the movie, at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our YouTube channel. So please come join us.
This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
This has been a Los Alamos production. All rights reserved.